Take a moment to look at your life, not the version you show to others, but the one you feel when the house is quiet and the distractions of the day have finally faded. Have you ever felt it? That subtle, cold realization that doing everything right is no longer working. You followed the script, you checked the boxes, you pursued the education, secured the steady job, committed to the mortgage, and faithfully contributed to the retirement account. You played by the rules that were handed down to you as if they were sacred texts. Yet despite your obedience to the system, the ground feels increasingly liquid. There is a sense that the milestones you were told would anchor you are actually starting to pull you under. As we move through 2026, we are witnessing a strange and terrifying paradox. The traditional safe path, the one characterized by moderation, steady employment, and conservative financial planning, has quietly transformed into the most dangerous route a person can take. What was once considered a responsible, middle-of-the-road life is now, for all intents and purposes, a suicidal strategy. The world has shifted, but our internal maps haven't caught up. We are using a 20th century guide to navigate a landscape that no longer honors the old landmarks. Look around you at the people you work with, or perhaps at the person you see in the mirror. There is a specific kind of sedation that has taken hold of the modern professional. We have become what I call the zombie employee. This isn't someone who is lazy or incompetent. In fact, they are often quite productive, but they are sedated. They are kept in a state of quiet compliance by the availability of cheap credit and the persistent illusion of stability. You feel the pressure rising, you see the cost of living detaching from reality, yet you stay the course because the alternative feels too chaotic to contemplate. You tell yourself that if you just work a little harder or wait for the next promotion, the safety you were promised will finally materialize. But while you are focusing on the next rung of the ladder, a structural trapdoor is being prepared beneath your feet. It isn't a conspiracy, and it isn't personal. It is the cold, mathematical reality of an economy that no longer has a use for the middle. The safety nets that supported your parents have been retracted, replaced by a thin veneer of corporate benefits and fluctuating markets. You are being lulled into a false sense of security, while the very foundations of the middle-class lifestyle are being dismantled. This brings us to a hard truth that we must face if we are to survive what comes next. We are entering an era where good is the new mediocre. In the past, being good at your job, being a good neighbor, and making good choices was enough to guarantee a life of dignity and relative freedom. That is no longer the case. Today, good is merely the baseline for replacement. If you are doing what is expected of you, you are already falling behind. We are witnessing the structural dissolution of the middle class, a process where those who cling to the center are being squeezed out of existence. In this landscape, mediocrity is no longer a comfortable plateau where you can rest. It is a death sentence for your freedom. If you stay where it is crowded, if you think, act, and invest like the majority, you are positioning yourself exactly where the weight of the coming transition will be heaviest. The trap is set for those who believe the old ways still work. To survive, you must first recognize the sedation for what it is. You must wake up to the fact that the path of least resistance is now the path to certain obsolescence. The question isn't whether the system is changing. The question is whether you will be standing on the trapdoor when it finally swings open. Why 2026? Why does this specific year feel like the moment the gears of the old world finally begin to grind to a halt? It isn't because of a single catastrophic event or a sudden dramatic collapse. It is something far more clinical and relentless. We are standing at a global event horizon where three massive independent forces are finally colliding: fiscal policy, corporate debt, and the shifting weight of demographics. These aren't just abstract concepts for economists to debate. They are the walls of a room that is slowly getting smaller, and most people are still trying to figure out where they left the remote. Let's look at the first wall,
the fiscal cliff. For years, the middle class has been living under a temporary reprieve, a set of tax provisions that many took for granted as the new permanent reality. But as we move through 2026, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is expiring. This isn't just a minor adjustment or a tweak to the brackets. For millions of households, the reality is a staggering increase in the tax burden. Some estimates suggest an effective tax hike of up to 62% when you factor in the sunsetting of various deductions and the restructuring of credits.
Think about the child tax credit, a lifeline for many families trying to stay afloat in an inflationary environment. That is being slashed, effectively pulling thousands of dollars out of the pockets of the very people who were told they were the backbone of the economy. When you combine this with the reversion of standard deductions, the math for the average family no longer adds up. You haven't changed your lifestyle, you haven't made a mistake, yet suddenly the government is taking a significantly larger bite of a pie that was already shrinking. This is the first mechanism of the trap, the quiet, legal extraction of the middle class's remaining liquidity. While this is happening at the household level, an even larger shadow is being cast by the $3 trillion wall of corporate debt. For the better part of a decade, corporations lived on a diet of cheap money. They borrowed billions at near zero interest rates, using that capital to fund expansions, buy back shares, and maintain the appearance of growth. But that debt wasn't a gift, it was a loan with a due date. And that date is now. In 2026, companies are hitting a massive maturity wall. They must now refinance that $3 trillion in debt, but the world has changed. They aren't refinancing at 2% anymore. They're looking at 7, 8, or even 10%. This is a solvency crisis masquerading as a business cycle. When a corporation sees its debt service costs triple overnight, it doesn't look to the CEO's bonus or the lobbyist's budget to close the gap. It looks for the most expensive, most replaceable layer of its infrastructure. This is the direct link to your survival. When corporations face this kind of pressure, they don't cut the entry-level workers who do the basic labor, nor do they cut the executives who hold the keys to the castle. They cut the middle management layer. They cut the people who have spent 15 years climbing the ladder, the people with the titles, the benefits, and the comfortable salaries. These are the people who represent the heart of the middle class. They are the primary targets of this realignment. You see, this isn't a traditional recession. A recession implies a temporary dip before a return to the status quo. What we are witnessing is a fundamental realignment of how value is distributed. The system is shedding its middle layer because, in an age of high-interest debt and advanced automation, that layer is seen as an unnecessary friction. If you are sitting in that middle layer, believing that your years of service or your specialized knowledge of internal company politics will protect you, you are miscalculating the coldness of the math. Corporations aren't being mean, they're being survivors. They're jettisoning weight to keep the ship from sinking. If you happen to be part of that weight, the safety net you thought was there, the one woven from decades of 20th century promises, has already been retracted. The pension plans, the job security, the idea that loyalty is a two-way street, these are the artifacts of a bygone era. To survive this, you have to stop thinking of these events as bad news and start seeing them as data points. The fiscal cliff and the debt wall are the indicators that the safe path has been compromised. If your survival strategy depends on the tax code staying the same or your employer's debt remaining manageable, you are not a strategist, you are a passenger. And the driver has just checked the map and decided to take a turn that doesn't include your destination.
The objective here isn't to cause panic, but to foster a brutal kind of clarity. You must recognize that the structures you were told to trust are currently undergoing a controlled demolition. By the time the dust settles, the middle ground will be gone. There will be those who anticipated the realignment and positioned themselves accordingly, and there will be those who spent 2026 waiting for things to get back to normal. For the survivor, there is no normal to return to. There is only the new reality and the agility required to navigate it. To understand why the ground is shifting beneath us in 2026, we have to look back at the ghosts of history. We often believe our problems are unique, but the psychological trap of the good citizen is a recurring theme in human civilization. To see our reflection, we must look into the Weimar Mirror, the Germany of 1923. Back then, there was a group known as the Mittelstand, the backbone of society. These were the quintessential good citizens. They were the shopkeepers, the teachers, and the mid-level bureaucrats who lived by the virtues of thrift and hard work. They did exactly what they were told. They saved their marks, they bought government bonds, and they trusted in the stability of the state. But as hyperinflation took hold, they watched in horror as a lifetime of labor was erased in a matter of months. Meanwhile, the speculators, those who understood the changing nature of the game, thrived by taking on debt and moving into hard assets. This created what historians call the saver's penalty. It is a specific kind of psychological trauma where virtue is punished and vice is rewarded. When the currency loses its meaning, the person who saved is the fool, and the person who spent is the genius. We are seeing the echoes of this today. When you see your purchasing power evaporating despite a stable salary, you are experiencing the modern saver's penalty. The system is essentially telling you that the tradition of working hard and saving is no longer a path to security. It is a path to subsidized poverty. This leads us to a fascinating and uncomfortable archetype, the bourgeois disaffecté, a concept explored by the writer Drieux-La Rochelle. He described a specific type of person, the sedentary, sedate individual who clings to the tradition of money coming from sources other than active, vital work. This is the person who feels entitled to a certain lifestyle because they have a title or a degree. They are disaffected from the reality of the world because they are protected by a layer of artificial comfort. But as we've discussed, that layer is dissolving. The middle class has become sedated by this comfort, believing that a quiet, sedentary life is the natural state of things. Ancient wisdom tells us otherwise. The Stoics lived by the concept of amor fati, a love of fate. This wasn't a passive acceptance, it was an active, vital engagement with whatever the world threw at them. They knew that comfort is often the precursor to decay. A body that never faces resistance becomes weak. A mind that never faces uncertainty becomes fragile. Contrast our modern sedentary safety with the warrior codes of the past, which emphasized agility and detachment. The ancient survivor knew that the moment you become too attached to your comforts, your specific house, your specific social status, your specific routine, you become vulnerable. You become a target for fate. The middle class is currently being targeted precisely because it is the most attached to its status and the least agile in its thinking. The survival mindset requires us to break this sedation. We must move away from the bourgeois expectation that the world owes us stability in exchange for our compliance. We have to reclaim the vitality of the active worker, the strategist who sees the world as it is, not as they wish it to be. History shows us that during periods of extreme realignment, the people who suffer most are not necessarily the poorest. They are already used to struggle.
The ones who suffer most are those who were comfortable and refused to believe that the comfort was temporary. They cling to their marks, their titles, and their traditions until the very end, only to realize that the world that honored those things has vanished.
The ancient survivor knows that security is an internal state, not an external one. It is the ability to pivot, to adapt, and to remain vital even when the structures around you are crumbling. If you are waiting for the system to return to a state where saving and being good is enough, you are waiting for a ghost. True survival in 2026 starts with the philosophical realization that the old virtue of the good citizen has been weaponized against you. To survive, you must stop being a good citizen of a dying system and start being a vital strategist of the new world. To understand the mechanism of the trap, we have to look at the unseen forces shaping the 2026 economy. We often talk about the market as if it's a neutral place where supply meets demand, but in the modern era, that market has been replaced by what Jaron Lanier calls the Siren Server. These are the massive, centralized hubs of data and algorithmic power that now dominate every sector of human activity. The Siren Server effect is a quiet, digital erosion of the middle layer. In a hyper-connected economy, these servers wash away the people who used to facilitate transactions, manage information, or provide average professional services. Think of the mid-level insurance broker, the travel agent, or even the junior attorney. Their value wasn't in being extraordinary, it was in being a reliable bridge between a complex system and the consumer. But today, the algorithm is the bridge. It doesn't need a desk, it doesn't need health insurance, and it doesn't need a middle-class salary. This leads us to what I call the bifurcation of value. We are moving into a world where there is no longer a bell curve of talent. There is only a sharp, jagged divide. On one side, you have the exceptional, the people who use the Siren servers as tools to amplify their unique insights. On the other, you have the commodity, the people who are managed by the servers. If an AI or a centralized database can do the work of 5 mid-level engineers or accountants, the 4 who are merely good fall directly into the trap. They are squeezed downward into the gig economy or into low-level service work, while the one who is exceptional sees their value skyrocket. If you are currently operating in the middle, if your work is predictable, repeatable, and good enough, you are effectively standing on a melting ice cap. The Siren server is warming the water, and your space is shrinking every single day. But there is even a deeper, more mathematical reason why the middle class is being hollowed out, and it's something most people have never even heard of: the Cantillon Effect. Named after an 18th century banker, this principle explains that money is never neutral. When a government or central bank prints new currency, as they have done at a staggering rate leading into 2026, that money doesn't enter the economy all at once. It enters at the top. It goes to the big banks, the major corporations, and the politically connected first. These entities get to spend that new money while its purchasing power is still high. They buy assets, they buy real estate, and they buy influence. By the time that money trickles down to you in the form of a nominal wage increase or a stimulus check, it has already done its damage. The influx of new currency has already driven up the price of the things you need to survive: food, fuel, and housing. Your nominal raise is an illusion. In real terms, your purchasing power has been stolen by inflation before the money even reached your hands. This is why saving fake money, the fiat currency in your bank account, is mathematical suicide. You are saving a medium that the government is literally incentivized to destroy to pay off its own debts. The middle class is the primary victim of the Cantillon effect because they are the ones who work for the currency and save the currency.
The owner class doesn't care about the currency, they care about the assets that the currency buys. This brings us to one of the most sacred myths of the middle class, the home as an asset. In the 20th century, a 30-year mortgage was a foundation. It was the way you built equity and secured your future. But in the shifting, volatile economy of 2026, that mortgage can easily become an anchor. We are in an era that requires extreme mobility and agility. If the Siren Server eliminates your industry in one city, you need to be able to move to where the value is being created. But if you are locked into a 30-year commitment on a depreciating or stagnant suburban asset, you are physically and financially tethered to a sinking ship. You cannot move to where the opportunity is because you are house poor. You are paying for the privilege of staying in a place that no longer has a use for you. The trap is designed to keep you stationary. It wants you to stay in the middle, saving a dying currency, locked into long-term debt, and performing work that an algorithm can eventually mimic. To survive, you have to break the logic of the trap. You have to realize that what you were told was an investment is often just a liability with a nice lawn. Survival in this landscape requires a complete inversion of your financial thinking. You must stop trying to accumulate more of the currency and start focusing on moving as close to the source of value as possible. You must stop being the person who is managed by the server and start being the person who directs it. The middle ground is being washed away. You must choose which side of the divide you intend to stand on. The theory is clear, but how does it look when you step out of your door and into the streets of 2026? How do you actually navigate an urban environment where the social fabric is thinning and the middle is falling away? It starts with your career. In this landscape, you can no longer be a commodity. A commodity is something that can be easily replaced by a cheaper version, whether that version is a person in another country or a line of code on a server. To survive, you must become a linchpin. A linchpin is the part of a machine that holds the whole thing together. If you remove it, the machine stops working. In the professional world, this means developing a combination of skills that are impossible to commoditize: leadership, high-level synthesis, and deep emotional intelligence. While others are obsessing over technical certifications that will be obsolete in 2 years, the survivor focuses on the ability to navigate human complexity and solve problems that don't have a manual. You must be the person who can look at the chaos and find the order. If your job can be described in a 3-page manual, you are a commodity. If your job requires a unique human touch that cannot be replicated, you are a linchpin.
This brings us to the most dangerous tool in the modern trap: debt. Most people see debt as a single category, but the survivor knows there is a world of difference between suicidal debt and strategic debt. Suicidal debt is anything used to fund a lifestyle you haven't earned. It is the high-interest credit card balance, the car payment on a vehicle that is depreciating faster than you can pay it off, and the buy now, pay later schemes that litter the digital landscape. This debt is the chain that keeps you in the mediocre trap. It forces you to say yes to a job you hate because you cannot afford a single month of unemployment. Strategic debt, on the other hand, is a weapon. As authors like Robert Kiyosaki have long suggested, the wealthy use debt to acquire hard assets, gold, silver, Bitcoin, or productive real estate, that hold value even as the currency itself is being debased. In 2026, where the saver's penalty is in full effect, holding fake money is a risk. Strategic debt allows you to use the system's own inflation against it. You borrow the dying currency to buy the thing that cannot be printed. But be warned, this is a razor-edge strategy. It requires a level of discipline and timing that the mediocre mindset simply cannot maintain. This leads to the liquidity strategy. There is a school of thought,
often associated with Harry Dent, that suggests we're entering a demographic winter. As the population ages and spending patterns shift, there will be moments of intense deflation where the mediocre are forced to sell everything they own just to survive. In these moments, cash, specifically high liquidity, becomes the ultimate survival tool. While everyone else is locked into illiquid assets like houses they can't sell, the survivor stands ready with the ability to act. Having the liquid resources to buy when others are desperate is how the owner class is minted during a crisis. Finally, you must navigate the changing social hierarchy. For decades, the middle class was a safe, respectable place to hide. That social cover is gone. You are now being forced to choose a side. You must decide if you are going to be an owner, someone who controls assets and directs their own life, or if you are going to strive for the exceptional status that makes you indispensable to those owners. There is no longer a safe middle. If you try to stay there, you will find yourself in a world of increasing social tension, higher taxes, and diminishing services. You will be the one footing the bill for a system that is no longer designed to serve you. To survive 2026, you must let go of the desire to be average. In a world that is bifurcating, the center is the most dangerous place to be. You must move to the edges, where the agility is high and the Siren servers cannot easily reach you. You must become the person who is too valuable to lose and too mobile to catch. Survival is rarely a matter of physical strength alone. It is a battle of the mind. To escape the mediocre trap in 2026, you must first confront the most difficult obstacle of all, your own ego. The modern middle class is profoundly addicted to a specific kind of drug, the drug of nominal status. We are hooked on the titles on our business cards, the professional labels we've spent decades earning, and the social validation that comes from having a respectable career path. But here is the hard truth you must face. In a period of structural realignment, your title is a liability. If you define yourself as a senior marketing manager or a vice president of logistics, you are anchoring your identity to a role that the system is currently looking to automate or outsource. You must break this ego attachment. You are not your job title. You are a set of skills, a capacity for resilience, and a strategic actor in a changing landscape. If you cling to the status of your old life while the world is demanding a new version of you, you will be dragged down with the wreckage of the old structures. This requires a profound level of emotional discipline. The fear of leaving the sedate life, the life of predictable routines and modest comforts, is what keeps the trap shut. We have been conditioned to believe that any move away from the consensus is risky. But in 2026, the consensus itself is the risk. The survival mindset requires the courage to be disaffected from the standard narrative. It means being okay with others thinking you are making a mistake when you move your assets out of the traditional system or when you pivot your career towards something others don't yet understand. Most people live in a state of constant reaction. They wait for the news to tell them there's a crisis, and then they panic. The survivor operates on a different frequency, awareness. Awareness is the ability to see the 2026 cliff while it is still on the horizon. It is the discipline to position yourself before the herd moves. When the crowd finally realizes the trap is closing, they will trample each other to get to the exits. The survivor is already on the other side, watching with a calm, focused gaze. This leads to the final component of the inner transformation, radical agility. This isn't just about moving fast, it's about the mental capacity to pivot your entire career or asset base in a matter of months, not years. Most people are mentally heavy. They have too many opinions, too much emotional baggage tied to their current path, and too much pride to admit when a strategy isn't working.
To survive the coming years, you must become light. You must be willing to let go of a decade of training if that training is no longer relevant. You must be willing to learn a new language, move to a new city, or adopt a new financial philosophy without hesitation. The ego wants to stay the course to prove it was right. The survivor wants to live, and therefore they are always willing to change. Breaking the addiction to comfort and status is the only way to ensure that when the trapdoors open, you are already standing on solid ground. We have spent this time deconstructing the trap, mapping the walls of the 2026 cliff, and examining the psychological sedation that keeps most people stationary. But awareness without action is merely a different form of despair. To survive and thrive in this era, you need a code, a set of non-negotiable rules that dictate how you move, how you invest, and how you value your time. This is the synthesis, the survival code for the post-2026 world. Rule number 1. Abandon the consensus. If the majority of people believe a certain path is safe, you must treat it as the epicenter of the trap. The consensus is built on lagging data. It is a reflection of what worked 10 years ago, not what is working now. By the time a strategy becomes common sense, its value has already been extracted by the early movers. In 2026, the herd is being led toward a fiscal and professional slaughter. If you find yourself in agreement with the standard news cycle, the standard career advice, or the standard investment tips, you are in the danger zone. Your primary task is to find the quiet opportunities, the ones that require a level of nuance and effort that the average person is too sedated to pursue. Rule number 2. Short the currency, long the asset. This is the mathematical response to the Cantillon Effect. Never save your life's energy in a medium that the government is incentivized to destroy. Fiat currency is not a store of value. It is a melting ice cube designed to lubricate the transactions of the elite. Every hour you spend working for a currency that is being printed into oblivion is an hour you are losing. Instead, you must move your wealth into hard assets, things that cannot be summoned out of thin air by a central bank. Whether it is gold, silver, Bitcoin, or productive land, these are the anchors that will hold your purchasing power as the currency devalues. You are effectively betting against the paper and betting on the reality of limited supply. This isn't just a financial move, it is a move of sovereignty. Rule number 3. Become a linchpin. We have seen how the Siren Servers and AI are hollowing out the middle layer of the workforce. You cannot compete with an algorithm on speed or accuracy, but an algorithm cannot compete with you on synthesis, leadership, and high-level emotional intelligence. Focus your energy on developing soft skills that are fundamentally uncommoditizable. Be the person who can manage the AI, the person who can navigate a complex human crisis, or the person who can see the patterns that the data crunchers miss. In a world of infinite average supply, the person who provides unique, high-value synthesis is the only one who maintains leverage. If you are replaceable, you will be replaced. If you are a linchpin, you are the one who dictates the terms. Rule number 4. Maintain extreme liquidity or extreme ownership. The middle ground is where the liabilities live. Avoid the middle ground traps like 30-year mortgages in dying suburbs or long-term employment contracts that offer the illusion of security without the reality of control. You want to be on one of two ends of the spectrum. Either you maintain extreme liquidity, the cash is king strategy, so that you can act instantly when the mediocre are forced to sell their assets during a crisis, or you maintain extreme ownership. You own the business, you own the land, you own the intellectual property.
Ownership gives you the power to pivot. Liquidity gives you the power to strike. Anything in between is just a chain. The core principle that ties this entire code together is simple but brutal. Your survival is proportional to your distance from the average. In the 20th century, the average was a place of safety. In 2026, the average is the kill zone. The further you can move from the median in your thinking, your skills, and your assets, the more likely you are to remain standing when the structures of the middle class finally dissolve. You are not looking for a fair game. You are looking for an asymmetric advantage. This code isn't about being rich or famous. It is about being free. It is about recognizing that the old world's definitions of success are the very things being used to bait the trap. By abandoning the consensus, protecting your purchasing power, becoming indispensable, and staying agile, you are withdrawing your consent from a system that no longer has your best interests at heart. You are becoming a survivor in the truest sense, someone who doesn't just endure the winter, but someone who understands how to build a fire while others are waiting for the sun to return. As we look toward the horizon of the post-2026 era, it is important to frame this coming transition correctly. We often speak of economic shifts and structural realignments in terms of tragedy or crisis, but for the person with a survival mindset, this is simply an economic winter. In nature, winter is not a mistake. It is a necessary cleansing season. It is the time when the weak, the stagnant, and the diseased are removed to make room for new vital growth. If you feel the chill of this season, do not meet it with panic. Panic is the frantic energy of the unprepared. Instead, cultivate a quiet strength. This is the strength of the person who has seen the mechanism of the trap and quietly stepped aside. You don't need to shout from the rooftops or try to save those who are determined to stay sedated. Your primary responsibility is to your own resilience and the security of those you lead.
The wise person does not rush headlong into the chaos. They observe, they prepare, and when they act, they do so with the precision of a surgeon. True security in this new world does not come from a specific bank balance, oppressive title, or the approval of your peers. Those are external markers that can be taken away in a single fiscal cycle. True security comes from the inner realization that you are no longer a prisoner of the mediocre trap. You have seen the walls, you understand the math, and you have mastered the psychological discipline required to pivot. Therefore, you are free. The coming years will be loud. There will be political theater, social upheaval, and the desperate noise of a middle class realizing it has been abandoned. Do not let that noise penetrate your inner sanctum. Stay grounded in the reality of hard assets, high-value skills, and radical agility. While the herd reacts to the headlines, you will be acting on the data. As you move forward, carry yourself with the calm of a strategist who knows the terrain. The structures around you may crumble, and the safe paths may disappear, but your value is not tied to those structures. It is tied to your awareness and your will to adapt. Walk with awareness, stay grounded, and remember that the greatest survival tool you possess is the clarity to see the world as it truly is, rather than how you were told it should be. The winter is coming, but for those who are prepared, it is simply the season that precedes a much stronger spring. Stay vigilant, survive the chaos.